Welcome everyone. My name is Marc-Andre Pigeon, and I'm the director of the Canadian Centre for the Study of Co-operatives. We're really happy you joined us today. And before we begin, I want to acknowledge, I'm going to do my land acknowledgement in a bit of a roundabout way. I want to acknowledge that we find ourselves today in a difficult position here in Canada. The President of the United States has declared his intention, and I do not presume it's representative of everyone there to annex our country, or at least cause us some economic pain. And if you're like me, it's easy to fall back into a kind of state of disbelief. Imagine this is just maybe a bad dream, but of course we have to recognize that isn't the case. This is happening, and it's real. And I think in these difficult moments, it can be comforting to stay grounded. And I mean, quite literally, touching the ground, right? Touching the earth, being in nature, recognizing that we show up as our best selves when we remember that we share this place, this planet, this continent, this country, this province, this region, this city, this patch of land. And so I'm reminded of these ideas, these comforting ideas, at least for me, because I come to you from Treaty 6 territory, and this is the traditional land of the Cree, the Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and it has been for millennia. It's also the traditional homeland of the Métis. And these are people, of course, who we all know have lived through the colonial enterprise, an enterprise that was my forefathers and many of our forefathers and foremothers were part of. They felt this kind of sharp edge of imperialism, and I take solace, at least in some measure, in the knowledge that they survived and I think are thriving. So I think they have much to teach us in this difficult moment. And so today I am especially grateful for this opportunity to work on this land and share in its bounty, reflect on its beauty, and reaffirm our commitment to its stewardship, to the importance of honor and truth, and the shared and necessary and important work of reconciliation. I think our way through this crisis is together in cooperation. And so that's a great way to kind of introduce our speaker today. It's Tom Ivey, and Tom is the Community Development Manager at DotCooperation. If you've never heard of DotCooperation, it was formed in 2001, and its mission is to unite and strengthen the cooperative community through a shared and recognized online identity. Now, most famously, DotCooperation manages the global .coop and .credit union domains, which have cultivated brand recognition and legitimacy for the international cooperative movement. If you've been to our Canadian Centre for the Study of Cooperatives website lately, you'll also see that we are a proud member of the Global .coop registry. Now, in his role at DotCooperation, Tom is dedicated to the education, promotion, and support of the global network of cooperatives. And today, Tom's going to talk to us a bit about DotCooperation, some of their exciting new initiatives, and maybe even share a little bit about the research they plan. Tom was telling us a bit about that before we got on the call here. So, Tom, I'll give it to you in 1 second. Just a little bit of an outline about how things are going to work in case you're new to our co-op conversation. We're going to give Tom 15, 20 minutes, roughly, and then we're going to have a short conversation. Tom has a really great question for our breakout this month. I think you're really going to enjoy it, and it'll be helpful for him and engaging for us. These breakouts that we're going to do after Tom's opening remarks are really great ways to kind of get to know people, meet people across regions. I've heard from people firsthand that they've met and developed acquaintances and friendships through these meetings, these breakouts. So really encourage you to stick around and be participant if you can. While we're in this meeting this afternoon, this co-op conversation, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, you can message Stan Yu, and Stan's going to wave to folks, and he'll be able to help you. We're also going to be, just so you know, we're going to record this session, and we're going to share the link to the recording to anyone who's registered for the event. We always get a lot more registrants than attendees, and a lot of people just watch the conversation afterwards. So with that out of the way, Tom, the floor is yours. Welcome to Canada and Saskatchewan.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Marc-Andre, for that introduction. And it's my distinct pleasure to be here to speak to the community that you have. And I can't wait to learn as much from you as I hope you also learn from me as we go through this presentation. And so I'll without further ado, I'll come on here and start my screen share. and get started on talking a little bit about what we're up to. So let me know when you can see what I see, and I'll just get started on the slideshow from the beginning here. There we go.
We can see it, Tom. You're good to go.
Fantastic, fantastic. So yeah, so uh, as Marc-Andre said, I'm Tom, and I work for DotCooperation, and I'm starting off with my headline on the slide here. My topic of discussion today will be focused primarily around the Cooperative World Map project, which you may or may not have heard of. And I will be discussing a little bit about how the Cooperative World Map project came to be, the data that we are going to be gathering from it and what we have gathered from it, a little example of how the data can help us assist in understanding the picture of cooperatives, to ask some questions of you of how you see this data being valuable and applicable to the work that you're doing and the areas that you work in. And I'll also talk a little bit about DotCooperation and the other projects that we have as well. And I'm just going to start my timer here to make sure that I don't talk for a couple of hours uh, and bore you all to death, because I had to cut down quite a lot of information here. So okay, let's just see. Yeah, we can move forward. So a little bit about DotCooperation LLC, which is the organization I work for. If you don't know already, as Marc-Andre said, we're the identity provider for cooperatives globally, and our mission is to strengthen the cooperative movement through its own internet namespace. And our vision is to be the leading digital identity provider for cooperatives worldwide. And we started off with just the .coop domain name about 20 years ago. And we've since grown then to encompass a number of other projects and other initiatives that are all aimed at helping cooperatives present their digital identity more effectively, to market themselves more effectively, and brand themselves more effectively. So a little bit of a time scale for you. In 2002, we launched the .coop domain name. That was a collaboration between NCBA Clusa in America and PopTel, which was a worker cooperative here in the UK. In 2012, we underwent a restructure, and we invited the International Cooperative Alliance on board as a 50% owner, alongside NCBA Clusa. In 2013, we then added the Global Cooperative Mark, and you might have seen this being used by organizations to showcase the fact that they are a cooperative business. That was developed alongside a cooperative called Calvert's here in the UK. And we took over the management of this in 2014. And this was probably because we have one of the only global verification systems that I know of, at least, that is capable of verifying cooperatives in their local regional area, alongside our verification partners, which
Tom,
help us to do that.
Tom, sorry to
Yes,
interrupt
Mark?
you. There's some gray bars that are kind of cutting out your screen a little bit. Stan says he wonders if he can share his screen for your presentation, and you can just tell him to move slides ahead, because
No
we're
problem.
losing about a third of the image for some reason.
That's great.
Sorry about that.
We shared the presentation there because we thought there for just such an eventuality. So
There we
that's
go.
great.
That's much better, much better. And
Perfect.
you can just say move ahead a slide, Stan, and we'll do it that way.
Will do. That's great. Thank you very much, Stan. Brilliant.
Sorry about
So,
that.
no problem. So yeah, so as I was as I said there, in 2014, we became the manager of the mark on behalf of the ICA, and we were using a verification system which allowed us to verify cooperatives in their local region, and with their local laws, and so that's allowed us to become the manager of that system. In 2017, we then went through a restructure, and in 2020, we acquired the .creditunion domain name from CUNA, which is the Credit Union National Association of the USA. And I need to update this timeline now with an extra one, because last year we also launched officially the Cooperative World Map project as well. If you'd like to advance slide, please, Stan. There we go. And so the talk of data and the way that data works within .coop, why we decided to focus more on gathering cooperative data and putting it together into a global data project, and then to build assets such as the world map out of this started with some questions. And these are questions that over the last 20 years or so, when we've been involved in the cooperative community at large and we've gone out there and attended events and spoken to cooperatives, we were coming up against the same questions all the time. People were asking, where are the cooperatives in their network? Where is the data on the cooperatives? And how can we learn more about it? And we realized that there was a lot of data out there, a lot of public data, but it was intrinsically siloed and often very regional, very specific, localized, and not easily visible outside of outside of local networks. So we knew there was data there that we just needed to bring it together. If you'd like to advance slides now. So this gave birth to an idea. The data's out there. We just need to be able to find it. We need to be able to clean it and merge it together and to put it in one place where it can be accessible. And this wasn't a new idea. And the first thing we realized when we embarked on this project was there was a great many other organizations out there that had been working on these questions for a long time, that had been involved in mapping. Often data projects were set up and they were either quite localized or specific in their objectives, or they may have just failed over time due to a lack of being able to update the data or funding and various other things. So there was a lot of people with a lot of experience out there that had the same sort of idea. And fantastically, we are now starting to work with a lot of these people as they become aware of our project. They come to get involved in what we're doing. Next slide, please. So the first thing that we did was to form a cooperation, a partnership between DotCoop and Digital Commons Cooperative, which is a cooperative based here in the UK. And they are the tech providers that have built the platform that we are putting our data together in. They built this with open source technology. And this really allows us, it gives us the structure to be able to gather this data, to clean it, to merge it, and then to be able to use it to build other applicable services. And if you would go to the next slide, Stan. Thank you. And so began the Cooperative World Data Project. And the Cooperative World Map was really the first tool that was built from this project. And it is a searchable and filterable and updated map. And I'll give you the link to go and have a look at it soon. And we launched this back in November in Delhi with over 60,000 cooperative organizations on the map at launch. And really, the map at this point was a demo version, and it still is a demonstration of the technology in action and an example of how this thing can move forward. When we did the launch in November, we were aiming to gauge not only the appetite for the cooperative community on whether they would see the value in some project like this or whether they thought it would be something worthwhile in pursuing. And unanimously, almost, we were overwhelmed with the support this project had. We did a number of user case scenarios at all levels, from big national apexes all the way down to the cooperatives on the ground, working in sort of a few streets around them. And at all levels, we could find various reasons why this would be applicable to them and beneficial to them. And we're continuing to do a research piece this year to drive our development goals and to point us in the right direction for what cooperatives are going to find valuable when it comes to using this. So this is really just the start. We're just beginning with this. Next slide, please. So it was really, well, I like to think it was the beginning of something amazing. We had the feedback and the purpose of the map as we've started out at launch was really to achieve a number of things. The first was to discover and define the cooperative ecosystem. The ICA at the Delhi launch stated that 80% of the cooperative economy was hidden, which was a stunning statistic to me, because the fact that we have this huge number of cooperatives, 80% of them out there, that aren't visible above the local level or above their own area of work. Their work is going unrecognized and they're not in communication with the wider cooperative economy. So really, we are building a tool here to shine a light on that hidden ecosystem, to find the economy, to allow them to engage and create the environment for Principle 6. This will also help us to build our picture of the global cooperative economy and build our understanding. Not only that, but as a tool to allow cooperatives to find each other. This was direct feedback we had in cooperatives wanting to see who was around them. not only who is in the next street or just down the road, but who might be a useful ally in the region. We've seen through the pandemic that sustainability and diversity through communications and supply chains are critical to enable cooperatives to survive and to thrive. And this tool would allow cooperatives to build those with each other, and also as a tool to allow the public to find other cooperatives. So a lot of the feedback we got from cooperatives was the fact they knew that they had a cooperative identity, they knew that they had a cooperative difference, but they didn't understand how they could harness that to their best advantage. How could they promote themselves, particularly if they were resource scarce, which a lot of cooperatives are. So this is a tool, a tangible instrument that they could use to promote themselves to the general public. And lastly, of course, the heart and soul of this project, and the only way it will work, is by creating partnerships with numerous different cooperative organizations. We started off with a test case of 10 data providers, and we're building out a lot more, and looking also to provide link services and build new platforms. We've had some cooperatives come to us and say that they are very interested in focusing on their local region, their nation perhaps, and by bringing all of the cooperatives together into the data set, they would then be able to provide linked services, apps, other things aimed directly at cooperatives that are going to be able to benefit their movement and support their movement. So this is all at the heart of Principle 6. Thank you. Next slide, please. So where do we go from here? We've gone through the test cases, and we've launched the map. So now we begin the exciting next step of how we're going to build this outward. So as I said, we're working with partners for new features and services. I'm sure they won't mind me mentioning, but I spoke with a Swedish cooperative earlier this week that are really excited to map the entire Swedish cooperative ecosystem, working with a number of high-level cooperative partners in the region, and then use that to build platforms such as recruitment tools and other services aimed specifically at the cooperative ecosystem. So that's an example of this working in action. To map the hidden cooperatives in the wild, as the ICA term them, is another key priority for our project this year. And we are looking at setting up an onboarding chain for independent cooperatives to join the data set and to be present on the map, and to be able to provide their data, to contribute is the word I was looking for, their data to the picture and to become visible. And we'll also, of course, be building the data picture and building our data partner networks. The richer, the more data that we can bring in, the more comprehensive this picture will become. And we're focusing again, particularly on the underrepresented regions of the world. This year we'll be focusing a lot on the global south to aim to build a nice comprehensive global picture of maps. Next slide, please. So how can this map and how can the data that we provide actually give us some insights and some answers? So I thought the best way that I could show you a snippet of how this data can be interesting and valuable to us is to look at specifically the .coop domain data. This is primarily because it's the one I'm most familiar with, having worked within it for the last 9 years or so. And so I'd like to go through this and share some insights with you and get the conversation started. So next slide, please, Steph. Great. So this is the global picture of the .coop domain registrants. So we have over 5,000, between 5,000 and 6,000 global organizations that have registered about 9,000 domain names. And this is a breakdown of the top 9 countries by use. You might probably have assumed that the United States would be in the lead, and they are. They have 46% of the share of global domain name users. What is interesting is the reason why they're in the lead, and we'll look a little bit at how the sectoral breakdown affects that data. But they are, clearly on at the higher end of the user base in #1 position. In the second and third position, we see that France and Spain both have an 11% share of .coop domains. And what's interesting about this is in France, they have probably what I would say is the most healthy spread of digital tool use, where they have an even spread across most of their sectors of employment, and an even spread across most of the country when it comes to .coop domain use as well. So this is showing that there is a healthy spread of digital tech use amongst their cooperatives across the country. And Spain is in a similar position in terms of total domain name use, but they're a totally different scenario, which is even more interesting. They are very much focused around the Catalan region, and that is where we see a very bit high concentration of .corp domain use in that region. And we assume or the feedback that we've had from Spain is the fact that the Catalan region is, of course, a very autonomous region. They have very strong solidarity within their cooperative movement, and they use the .corp domain name to really showcase their solidarity and their cooperative nature on the digital scale. So we see that Spain is pushed into the top three there through that real cohesive visual identity that the Catalan region is driving. The UK is number 4, and that's natural, probably because .coop is based in the UK and has been. It was part of the Mid-Counties Cooperative for a long time, and we have a very close relationship with the Cooperatives UK, which is the national apex, and that's driven a high amount of .coop domain use. And I'm also happy to say that Canada is in the top 4. So I'd like to say congratulations for Canada being a global leader in the use of the .coop domain users. And I would actually like to get some feedback maybe for you could share in the chat why you think that Canada is a leader amongst the digital identity tools. I'd be interested to know if you have a strong tech sector, whether cooperatives are strongly growing uh, lately, and we'll look at the new registrations picture last year to also help um, to inform us a little there as well. Next slide, please, Dan. Okay, so this is the same global picture of .corp, but this is in new registrations, and this tells us some other interesting points. This is in 2024 by country in the top 9. You'll see that the US there has exact same share of new registrations last year than it has for total domains altogether. So that's again, we'll see why that is in the sectoral breakdown. And France and Spain. France then leads Spain by several percent in terms of new registrations. And again, I think this is down to the fact that they have the most homogeneous spread of .corp use across all sectors and regions, which contributes to a strong growth. And Canada actually jumps a place into the top 4 here. You outstrip the UK in terms of new cooperatives. And again, I would love to hear your opinion on why you think that may be. We worked quite closely with CMC last year. We attended the Congress, and the CMC were also a founding data contributor to the World Map at launch. So we have the Canadian data on the World Map, and I'm wondering whether this might be help contribute to the high number of new Canadian cooperatives we see adopting the tools. Another interesting point of data about this new registrations is the fact that Germany jumps up to have a 5% new registration share last year. And Germany, in terms of total registrations, is actually quite near the bottom. They've not been a widespread adopter of the domain name tools. And I think the percentage of new registration share increase is mostly down to the fact that there is a new generations of cooperatives coming into existence in Germany, particularly around Berlin, that are adopting the domain name tools, whereas previous cooperatives may have had some kind of historical sort of suspicion with the term cooperative, because that in the past, particularly when the country was split in two in Eastern Germany, the term cooperative meant something very different to that it does today. So I think these new generation of cooperatives coming today might be the reason why they're now Germany starting to look at adopting the international identity tools to better represent and showcase its cooperatives in that nation. I'm very quickly running out of time here, so I would quickly jump on to my last chart. Stan, if you'd like to move on to the next one. So this is a breakdown of the .corp global registrations by sector in the top 6 globally. And this interesting information, information is interesting because it shows that utility organizations or utility cooperatives have a 25% share in the global digital tools. And that is particularly because of the really strong cooperative network in US power cooperatives. And that's part of the reason why we see a huge share of the global .corp domain name registrations being taken by the US. A lot of it is very concentrated in this sector. I've had feedback from the sector, and they say that they see a cohesive online identity as being particularly effective and useful for them as a sector because it increases their lobbying power. and their collective bargaining power, particularly when they're dealing with their governmental bodies and externally. And they also see that the cooperatives are that they have also share a unified visual identity, so that the public can identify them immediately across the nation because of this cohesiveness. So that's something that drives the global picture of dot co-ops by sector there. Financial services and professional services are also both highly represented. Financial services include the credit union sector. We see a lot of credit unions using .coop, and of course we also have .credit union domain name. And professional services is highly ranked because of the I think the widespread of different cooperatives that use that, from design cooperatives, legal cooperatives, all those other organizations. So they have a large global share. One that really did surprise me, retail and housing didn't surprise me too much because of their public-facing nature. And retail obviously work in a network of tight margins, an ecosystem of tight margins. So it's very important for them to have an edge in their identity. But agriculture surprised me as well, that it was such a high digital tool user. And what's also interesting about the agricultural data is the fact that it's not concentrated in one country. It's actually spread across Europe, across the US, and also across some of Asia and Pacific and India as well. And I think this is mainly down to the fact that agricultural cooperatives are often in tight competition with the giants, the big agricultural giants that are gathering more and more of the market share in their areas under their wing. So the cooperatives are setting themselves up in competition and really leaning into their cooperative difference as a way to gather more agricultural partners into their sphere of operations. So if you'd like to go to the last slide now, Stan. So that was a real whistle-stop tour of all of the cooperative data. I think I probably could have broken it down by country and sector individually, and would have been really interesting to draw some more insights out of that. But really, that was just a demonstration of how you can take a data set and draw some interesting conclusions and see where cooperatives are operating and how they're choosing to meet the challenges that they do. You have a QR code there. If you'd like to use your phone, you can have a quick look at the map if you haven't already had a look at it. I would like to point out that I had a note from our developer this morning saying that there was a bug with iPhone users on the full screen for the map. So if you're using an iPhone, I do apologize if you run into a bug, but we're working on that to get that resolved as quickly as possible. So there we are. So I think I'll stop right there, lest I take up too much time.
Oh, that was great, Tom. Really, really interesting. So many questions. We are going to go to a breakout, but I do have a couple of really quick questions, and there's some stuff happening in chat. We'll come back to that after the breakout because I think there's some good points to bring up here. But have you seen anyone shift their domain name registration? Like, so in Canada, a lot of credit unions are .ca, or the Federated Cooperative System is .crs, which is Cooperative Retailing System. And I just wonder if there's ever been any effort to kind of get people who are already affiliated with the domain name to shift, or can you mirror, or is there some way to kind of keep what you have and then kind of jump in somehow? I'm just wondering how that works, what that looks like.
Yeah, sure, sure. In fact, it's something we love to talk about because a lot of people assume that if they can only have the one, and
Right.
if you've had the same one for 20 years, you don't want to change because it might, people might lose what they're looking for, So we actually say that there's a number of different ways you can use this. You can point several domains to the same page. So you could have a .coop, and a lot of organizations we know will have a .coop so that they get the access to the MARC files, so they get the data on the map. And all of this sort of thing. But they'll keep their old domain name as the one at the top. So you can also set up separate pages and have the domain pointing to different parts of your website sometimes. And we've had a couple of particular development or organizations will maybe have their old domain name as on their homepage, but then if it's got a page that's relating specifically to the work they're doing in a particular region, then they'll point a domain name based on a project or a region, say Canada.coop or something, and they'll point it just to that page. So it's a good way to sort of help direct people. So there's a lot of things you can do with it, and we like to try and draw people's attention to that fact that it's not a and or kind of question.
Right.
You can do a lot with that.
Okay, well, that's great. It seems like an interesting, it's the International Year of the Cooperative. Just seems like an interesting idea that you could encourage people to kind of really start playing into this unified global identity a little bit. We do have some
Yeah.
questions in chat. I feel like I have to, bring them onto the table a little bit. So Tom, do you know how you kind of verify? Is there any way of verifying that the folks who have the co-op domain are actually co-ops and not something else?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. So the .coop domain is what we call a protected domain, which means that it does have a verification process. And so when cooperatives come into, well, they register a .coop domain name, they come into our verification team. And then we request a number of articles or bylaws or evidence to prove that the cooperative in question is actually a cooperative. And we work in partnership with the local region, and also we have a widespread, a network of verification partners, usually local cooperatives or apexes that we can actually check with to make sure that the documents that we're receiving are legitimate. And so we have these number of checks in place. And in fact, one of the key things that we're working on this year is to really build up our affiliate partnerships. So our national apexes and other organizations that are able to simply pass their members over, and we can automatically verify them because we know that they're legitimate cooperatives. And we also do have a corpus information part of the verification process. So a cooperative, if they don't have any official documents yet, but they want to set up their website, they can still register a domain, and they come into us and we say, right, we'll put you on a 6 month uh, sort of onboarding period where they can use the domain, set it up for the website, and then we check back with them when they have the documents ready, so they can get started straight away.
Okay. So I do think we're going to do a little breakout. We'll just do maybe 8-10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll have a last plenary kind of conversation. So Stan, if we can do breakouts of 3 people per group, and the question that Tom is asking us to think about is, so the world map has many directions it could go in terms of serving cooperatives and driving data and insights about the global community. How would you like to use the map? Like, what would be a good use of the map for you? What could we create to help address that desire? So if you have something you think, hey, it would really be useful if the map allowed me to do this, what would we need to do to get there? So that's the question. And Stan, if you can break us out into groups of 3, we're for 8 minutes. We'll come back at 12:40 and then we'll wrap up. Tom, we had the best conversation in my group. I don't know what the other ones are like. It's like, it was very exciting. I don't know if people want to just offer up some sharing from their breakouts. I just offer that opportunity for people to volunteer. Anything that came out of their conversations. I know Yvonne and Garth, we had a good chat, but let's see, who wants to start us off?
Well, Tom was in our group, so he can summarize maybe, or Carol.
Okay, go ahead, Tom, and
I
then
could,
Mr.
yeah.
George after that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think Milton and Carol had a really interesting conversations, and Milton was talking about particularly a way, how can we use this to look at social infrastructure, particularly as a way to understand, because it's often invisible, particularly charities. You're saying there's a huge spread across the province, 85,000, I think you mentioned as a term. How can we gauge the health of these economies? How can we see it change over time? Because locally, very small, some things might be improving for you, but when you actually look at a wider region or something, things might be declining or changing it. And he said, if you can't see it, you can't address it. So this can be an early detection of patterns, which will give us signals to be able to look at those sort of things. He has a background in urban planning, so what's happening in structure and development there. So, and the other point that came out that would be really, really great to see is not just to be able to see the changes over time and to be able to draw patterns, but also to see richer data, such as the size of cooperatives. Not all cooperatives are equal. We can talk about numbers, but where are the big beasts? How are the big ones and the small ones? So that was a great conversation, and I think I thought we had a lot more to say. So Milton, please do reach out, email afterwards if you'd like to carry on
Well,
talking.
thank you, Tom. Just as a funny aside, Milton reached out to me after one of our other co-op conversations, and then I connected to someone who does have a I understand, significant set of data on the charitable sector. And so there's a lot of work that now I feel like Milton's slowly orbiting my universe a little bit, or I'm orbiting his. And, anyway, who was George? I think I saw. Where did he go?
Yeah,
There you
yeah,
are.
it
Oh, there
was
you are,
me.
George. Sorry, I lost you on the screen. Go
Oh,
ahead.
I was just going to say the question, how could the map help? I mean, in my job, I work as a purchaser, and I think I would like to buy more things from cooperatives. And so if the map could help me find, suppliers, that would be very helpful to me. Like, could I sort by, hey, I need trucking. Okay, well, is there a trucking cooperative? That sort of thing. I think the second piece of that for me would be the one-stop shop factor. I think I know in Canada we have I think it's called ISEE or something. There's another cooperatives listing. And I wonder if there might be a way to be like, give .crs domains or other domains like an honorable mention, right? Like, so because I mean, in my case, I might say, hey, I want a trucking cooperative. Can you please list all 5 or all 3 or like, so I can see them all, right? And then I could hopefully purchase from them. And then cooperatives could work with cooperatives, or I can at least get them on the RFP. So I'm asking for their bid too. That was our first thing. And then the second thing we talked about was your question earlier, which was why would it be growing in Canada? And I think a lot of that, there are 2 things there. One is the cooperative first, is definitely working to actively promote cooperatives, building them. And then the second piece, and this one concerns me a little bit more, is that I'm worried that there's a devolution happening in the economy where there are, we had the Walmart factor where Walmarts would move in and then they would drive out all the local businesses and then the Walmart shuts down. And so then you have a community that just doesn't have services. So then what do they do? What they've always done, they band together and they put together a co-op so they can buy stuff because if there's no store, you need a store, right? Like that's what happens. And so I'm worried with seeing things like, the Shell retail gas locations moved out of Saskatchewan to Manitoba. And so it's good news for sort of the FCL and CRS group in that we can expand, right? We can sell more gas but the concerning question is, hey, wait a minute, why did they back out? And what is going on there that they don't feel they can make money? And so, so I have a concern that the cooperative growth may, it's a good thing for us in the cooperative world. It's a concerning trend for Canada. Anyway, there's my points.
Thanks,
Hopefully
George.
that
That's
helps
great.
something.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Fantastic.
Tom, just so you know, Garth put a comment, and this kind of emerged in our little conversation, that he asked explicitly about the CRS, this cooperative retailing system. Could somehow that be kind of integrated, because it's co-op, right? It's just the word co-op's in the name, in the acronym. But is there ways of thinking about integration of those domain names that are co-op but not .coop? And so that was one point. Yvonne had and Garth was weighed in on this as well. I just want to make sure Yvonne, puts her idea on the table. Yvonne, your idea about the travel I thought was really cool and the connections there.
Yeah, so back in the 1960s, I'm a board member at the Saskatoon Co-op, and back in the 60s, we learned that there was a chartered flight that went from Saskatoon to the UK, and it was kind of a study tour where folks went to learn about the retail system and retail co-ops in the UK. And there was some excellent synergy that happened during that time, so much so that my GM, Gerald Hebert, informed us that sales the following year went up 18% for the Saskatoon Co-op after that interaction. Wow. And I just think that networking, synergies, understanding what works in the retail sector, and that's just the point of view that I come from, could be extremely valuable for folks in the co-op retail sector with such an opportunity like that. So we're actually considering reigniting the possibility. And Garth, who is with the CRS down in Arcola, he's on board. So, I mean, it could be like a Saskatchewan group of folks that charter a flight or, send a few reps to meet with people in the UK or other places in Europe. I just think that it would be really helpful to have a way of interacting with the map that there's, you know, maybe I see like just a really quick look that you can access different co-ops, and their websites are linked to the map. But it might be something too, to like others have identified, that you do it per sector. So there's housing co-ops, there's worker co-ops, there's retails, there's so on and so forth, and that there be maybe a color coding of like size, so that we know who to reach out to, and that there be links embedded within the map itself. It'd be so great. But I love this, and good work.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's fantastic feedback, and yeah, really valuable to get that that real sort of user case scenario, specific user case scenario, and even better to hear that you came to the UK. That was yeah, that's very
Well,
good to
so
hear.
Tom, I think Garth wants to weigh in on this point. So go ahead, Garth.
I like Yvonne's idea, but what I'd really like is for us to set up a travel co-op whose purpose is to connect people around the world in the same way we have. You can go on a 2-week excursion to wherever, and you have all-inclusive resorts for a week. I'd like to have it, we have an all-inclusive travel to this co-op, travel to that co-op, travel to wherever, and make it so it's a structure that continues to exist when the 20 or 30 of us aren't connected on this forum. We can still connect to this travel co-op that designs tours to different places in the world for co-ops meeting co-ops.
That's a really fun idea. Dion, you had a question I saw in chat. Do you want to bring it to the forum?
Yeah, I just actually am really curious if anyone knows if the CRS has registered also under the .coop, so that two things. One is that they'd be counted in the numbers, because if not, our numbers might be much higher in Canada. And second, yeah, and I think to Garth's point, if there is a way that we can also include co-ops that are currently registered under other domain names in some countries, I think it would indicate that would be fabulous.
I've heard nothing about that, Dion. But maybe somebody from FCL. I don't know if anybody's online from FCL right now, but I've heard nothing about it.
Yeah, because it's not that they would have to necessarily change their domain of .crs, but as long as they could register the other one as well, then they would be counted in all of this data.
Well, it could be like an alias too, right?
Yeah.
Is that right, Tom? That's what I was kind of asking earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can have it as connected to the website. So if someone types it in, it will take you to the website, but the website will change. The original domain name will still work. It'll still be at the top of the page. So you can have it. It's called pointing. So the several domains will point to the same website. And just to answer you there as well, Stan, saying that there was some data sharing between CMC's Co-op Map and the World Co-op Map. CMC actually they're a data partner. So their membership, their World Map is plugged into and merged with the .coop domain data on the map at the moment as a test case. So it was great to see that.
Oh, fantastic. I see Yvonne had another question. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Yeah, just in regards to that, so folks online from Saskatoon or Saskatchewan will know that we went through a huge security breach last year, and it was extremely painful to a lot of both the Federated Co-op folks, which are sort of oversee a lot of the retails across Western Canada. And I think that there may be some nervousness just in terms of the kind of security breaches that could potentially happen within something like this. And I guess one of the questions I have is like, how are you thinking about that?
That's an excellent question. Yeah, very poignant. So at the moment, we only share data that is available publicly in its own area and on its own section. And so we will share data, and we form we sign share a license with the data provider, which ensures that they retain ownership of the data and that we don't republish it without attribution. But ultimately, the entirety of the data that is brought together and merged is already publicly available at this time. As we go on to look at onboarding the cooperatives in the wild, we are now at the moment mapping out the legal control and ramifications of creating our own data set from new cooperatives that are coming in and creating their own data within the world map. That's going to have to be handled a little bit differently. But ultimately, at the moment, the cooperatives are in full control of how much data they share. And actually, we have had some co-ops that didn't want to share their first line of their addresses in order to protect their work that they were doing. So we manage that with our data providers. So anything the data provider wants to show or not show within the data that they give to us is completely within their remit. So we only publish things that they're allowed by permission.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tom. So we're approaching the end of our co-op conversation. I just want to point a couple things, and I'm going to do a pitch for our next co-op conversation, and then we'll let you go, Tom. The first thing I want to note is we are constantly kind of trying to, this awareness issue keeps coming up. We do a talk co-op survey every year, and it emerges as the #1 issue. And it just seems to me like this opportunity that you folks are building out is a really useful way of starting to address that awareness issue. And it came up in this conversation here. Stan and I are working on a publication and we're going to publish it any day now. We're going to get it out any day now on co-op employees. Do we find any evidence that they shop at other co-ops or even at their own co-op, right? And can we, this again feeds into that awareness issue, and the map is a nice way to kind of leverage that idea. So I just think this is a really rich area, and really grateful for you sharing with us today, Tom, and big virtual hand of applause for Tom. As you all know, or maybe not, our co-op conversations happen on the first Wednesday of every month, and we're extending into June this year. Normally we stop in May, but we had so much stuff, we pushed it out a month extra. The April 2nd co-op conversation is going to be focused on one of our big projects at the center, which is to build a critical mass of case studies about cooperatives that will sit at the Ivey School of Business case repository. And these are, as I mentioned in other contexts, this case repository is used all over the world in business schools all over the world. And so our goal is to kind of really get the co-op business model into business schools where it's otherwise a desert on co-op. So we're going to have 3 people who are involved in that project. Dion Poehler, who's written a very successful case and is our cooperative research chair, cooperative retail system chair, and cooperative governance. So she's going to talk from her perspective as someone who's written cases. Natalie Callio, sorry, Natalie, oh my God, there I'm stuck. Natalie Callio, who's a professional research associate at the center, and she's kind of leading this project, doing all the organizing work and herding the cats, and we're a lot of cats, hard to herd, but Natalie's doing a fantastic job there. And then we're going to have Violetta Gallagher, who was the associate director of product and publishing at the Ivey Publishing, who's kind of our interlocutor at the Ivey School of Business. So we're going to share a bit about what we've been doing, what our ambitions are, and even how you can get involved. So we hope to see you there. Thank you again for taking time to join us today. And thank you especially, Tom, for sharing some wonderful evidence and insights and an exciting development. Thanks, everyone.